Most people imagine manipulation as something obvious. They picture aggressive individuals, loud personalities, or people who openly seek control. But reality is far more complex. The most manipulative people rarely appear threatening. In fact, their greatest strength is often the exact opposite. They appear trustworthy, friendly, understanding, and even generous. Human beings are naturally wired to lower their defenses around those who make them feel comfortable. We trust familiar faces. We trust people who listen carefully. We trust those who seem to understand our struggles and validate our emotions. A skilled manipulator understands this psychological tendency better than most. They know that influence is rarely gained through force. It is gained through trust. This is why manipulation often hides behind a carefully constructed social mask. Before attempting to influence anyone, these individuals spend time building credibility. They create an image that feels safe and reliable. They present themselves as allies rather than opponents. By the time their true intentions begin to emerge, people have already invested emotionally in the relationship. The danger is not in what they reveal, but in what they conceal. Their power comes from remaining unnoticed while quietly shaping decisions, perceptions, and emotions from behind the scenes. The first step toward protecting yourself is recognizing a simple truth. The most powerful forms of influence rarely announce themselves. They arrive disguised as trust. Overlooked signs of a manipulative person is their ability to observe. Long before they attempt to influence someone, they often spend time gathering information. They watch how people react under pressure. They pay attention to what excites them, what frustrates them, and what they secretly crave. While others are focused on speaking, they are focused on learning. This process rarely looks suspicious. It may appear as genuine curiosity, deep interest, or thoughtful conversation. They ask questions, remember details, and encourage people to share personal experiences. The more information they collect, the clearer the psychological map becomes. They begin to understand a person's fears, desires, insecurities, ambitions, and emotional triggers. Every human being has vulnerabilities. Some seek approval. Some fear rejection. Some crave recognition. Others desperately want security or belonging. A manipulative person studies these emotional patterns because they understand a simple principle. People are easiest to influence when their deepest emotions are involved. Notice how certain individuals seem unusually interested in learning everything about you while revealing very little about themselves. Information, in their hands, becomes a form of leverage. The more they understand your emotional world, the easier it becomes to predict your decisions and influence your behavior. Their greatest advantage is not strength or intelligence. It is knowledge gained through careful observation. One of the most powerful forms of manipulation does not involve controlling your actions directly. Instead, it targets something far more valuable, your confidence in your own judgment. When people trust their perceptions, they are difficult to control. But when they begin questioning themselves, they become vulnerable to outside influence. Manipulative individuals understand this principle well. Rather than openly disagreeing or creating obvious conflict, they often use subtle methods that slowly weaken certainty. They may dismiss your concerns as overreactions, minimize your experiences, or repeatedly suggest that you are misunderstanding situations. Over time, these small moments create confusion. What once felt clear begins to feel uncertain. The strategy is effective because it happens gradually. A single comment may seem harmless. A single contradiction may not raise suspicion. But when these experiences accumulate, a person can begin second-guessing their own thoughts, memories, and instincts. They start seeking reassurance from the very person creating the confusion. This is where influence becomes powerful. The less confidence you have in yourself, the more likely you are to rely on someone else's interpretation of reality. Decisions become harder. Boundaries become weaker. Independent thinking slowly gives way to dependence. Pay attention to how you feel after interacting with certain people. Do you leave conversations feeling clearer and more confident, or more confused and uncertain? Manipulation often succeeds not because it is forceful, but because it quietly erodes self-trust. The moment you begin doubting your own perception, someone else gains the opportunity to shape it for you. Perhaps the most effective form of control is the one that feels like comfort. Manipulative people often understand that if they can make themselves emotionally indispensable, they no longer need to force influence. It happens naturally. The more someone depends on them for reassurance, validation, guidance, or emotional stability, the more power they gain over that person's decisions. At first, this behavior can appear caring and supportive. They are always available when problems arise. They offer advice, encouragement, and understanding. They position themselves as the one person who truly understands you. During difficult moments, this level of attention can feel comforting, even healing. But beneath the surface, a different dynamic may be developing. Instead of encouraging independence, they subtly encourage reliance. They may make you feel that their approval is necessary before making important decisions. They may become the first person you think about when seeking reassurance and the last person whose opinion you can ignore. Slowly, your emotional balance becomes connected to their presence. The danger is that dependency often disguises itself as closeness. What feels like a strong connection can gradually become a source of control. When someone becomes central to your emotional well-being, the fear of losing them grows. That fear can make people tolerate behavior they would normally reject, remain silent when boundaries are crossed, or sacrifice their own needs to preserve the relationship. A healthy relationship creates strength and self-confidence. It encourages growth, independence, and personal judgment. Emotional manipulation creates the opposite effect. It makes you feel as though you cannot function as effectively without the other person. The hidden strategy is simple. If someone can become your emotional necessity, they gain influence without ever having to demand it. True power over another person is rarely taken by force. It is often given away through dependency. Few things are more powerful than the feeling of obligation. Human beings are naturally inclined to return favors, repay kindness, and acknowledge generosity. This instinct helps build trust and cooperation in healthy relationships. But manipulative people understand that this same instinct can also be used as a tool of control. At first, their actions may appear exceptionally generous. They offer help before it is requested. They provide support during difficult times. They give advice, resources, attention, or assistance when others need it most. To outside observers, they seem thoughtful and selfless. Yet sometimes these acts of kindness come with an unspoken expectation. The debt is rarely stated directly. Instead, it exists beneath the surface. When a disagreement occurs, the past favors suddenly become relevant. When you attempt to set a boundary, you are reminded of everything they have done for you. When you choose a path they dislike, their generosity is subtly brought into the conversation. What once looked like kindness begins to feel like a transaction. The strategy works because most people dislike appearing ungrateful. The fear of disappointing someone who has helped us can create guilt. That guilt can influence decisions, silence objections, and weaken personal boundaries. Instead of acting according to their own judgment, people begin acting to repay an emotional debt that never seems fully settled. Healthy generosity expects nothing in return. It is given freely because helping others is the reward itself. Manipulative generosity operates differently. The gift is not the end of the exchange, it is the beginning of it. Every favor becomes a potential source of influence. Every act of support becomes a future bargaining chip. Pay close attention to how people react when you cannot give them what they want. Genuine kindness remains kindness, even when there is no reward. Manipulative kindness changes the moment repayment is denied. That is when the invisible debt becomes visible, and the true purpose behind the generosity begins to reveal itself. One of the most sophisticated tactics of manipulative people is their ability to control the narrative. They understand a reality that many overlook. People rarely judge situations based on complete facts. More often, they judge based on the story they hear first and the emotions attached to it. In many cases, perception becomes more influential than truth itself. Before conflicts arise, manipulators often begin shaping how others see them. They carefully craft an image of themselves as reasonable, trustworthy, misunderstood, or even victimized. This creates a foundation of credibility that can be used later when disagreements occur. By the time others hear a different version of events, the audience has already formed an opinion. Notice how some people seem unusually concerned with managing impressions. They constantly explain their intentions, justify their behavior, or subtly influence how others view certain individuals. Rather than allowing events to speak for themselves, they actively guide the interpretation of those events. Their goal is not always to change the facts, it is to change how the facts are perceived. This strategy becomes especially powerful during conflict. Before criticism can reach others, the manipulator may frame themselves as the injured party. Before someone shares a concern, they may quietly question that person's credibility. They create a storyline that favors their position long before the full truth emerges. As a result, others begin evaluating information through a lens that has already been carefully prepared. The reason this works is rooted in human psychology. Once people form an impression, they naturally look for evidence that confirms it. A well-crafted narrative can influence how every future action is interpreted. The same behavior may appear noble when performed by one person and suspicious when performed by another, simply because the story surrounding them is different. Those who seek control understand that influence often begins with perception. They know that if they can shape the story, they can shape the reaction. This is why it is important to pay attention not only to what people say, but also to who benefits from the version of events being presented. The truth stands on its own. Manipulation often depends on controlling the narrative around it. After examining these hidden signs, a deeper pattern begins to emerge. Manipulation is rarely about force, intimidation, or obvious control. The most effective manipulators do not dominate people through power. They influence them through perception, emotion, and subtle psychological pressure. Their greatest advantage is often that they remain unseen while their influence remains active. This is why awareness is more powerful than confrontation. Many people believe the solution is to expose, argue with, or defeat manipulative individuals. But direct confrontation often creates unnecessary conflict and can even strengthen their position. A person skilled in manipulation usually expects resistance. What they do not expect is someone who sees clearly and refuses to react emotionally. True power begins with observation. The moment you recognize a pattern, its influence starts to weaken. When you notice attempts to create dependency, guilt, confusion, or obligation, you gain the ability to choose your response rather than being controlled by it. Awareness creates distance, and distance creates freedom. Emotional self-control is the ultimate defense. Manipulation feeds on impulsive reactions, insecurity, fear, and emotional vulnerability. The more centered and self-aware you become, the fewer openings exist for others to exploit. You stop seeking constant validation. You stop allowing guilt to dictate your decisions. You stop confusing pressure with influence. The strongest people are not those who win every argument or expose every deception. They are the ones who maintain clarity when others try to create confusion. They remain calm when others attempt to provoke them. They trust their judgment while continuing to observe reality as it is, not as someone wants it to appear. In the end, manipulation loses its power the moment it becomes visible. A hidden trap only works when it remains hidden. Once you learn to recognize the signs, you begin moving through life with a different kind of strength, one built not on aggression, but on awareness, not on control, but on self-mastery. Because the greatest protection against manipulation is not becoming more suspicious of everyone around you. It is becoming so aware of human nature that deception can no longer operate in the shadows. And when you learn to see clearly, you become far more difficult to control than anyone who simply fights back. That is the true power of awareness, the power to remain free, no matter who stands before you.